So as you just heard, Sound Energy is a Mediterranean gas company, Morocco, Italy, and the bit of background first, 2005 listing with a view to go into Africa long before my time with the company. They were about an £11 million cash box at that point. Africa didn't work out for them, I don't really know why, but they ended up with 2 material exploration prospects in Indonesia. Fast forward 5 years, quite a lot of drilling, not so much hydrocarbons, quite a lot of dilution. And in 2011-12, we brought a new team in. We sold ourselves out of Indonesia. They were good, solid assets, but really the wrong scale for a small cap. We positioned ourselves through 3 private acquisitions with an Italian portfolio. That's the backbone of the business now. And then more recently, last summer, we broadened that out to include Morocco. So what you see now in front of you is onshore, it's gas, and it's Italy and Morocco, with some near-term action in Morocco where we started drilling last week. And then we get on to the introduction slide, which will probably tell you all exactly the same again. So across the bottom, you've got the 5 things which we've delivered in a way, the material things over the last 4 years or so. The Italian acquisitions, we brought some cost-covering production into the portfolio, which we believe for an oil and gas company is important to be able to pay your own bills with production. It's worth saying that gas prices in both Italy and Morocco are very high. Both countries, about 90% of their hydrocarbons, Algeria and Russia. And so the gas price reflects that. To give you some numbers, US is sat sub $2 per scuff, Morocco about 12, and Italy 6 or 7. So, you know, really high, large margins there. Production is very profitable. We brought in a cornerstone investor. They own about 15% of the shares. They're called Continental Investment Partners. It's Italian family money run through Lugano, and very important, particularly in a retail stock, to have a supportive cornerstone investor with a voice on the board, and that we have. And then more recently, we brought up 3 positions in Morocco. Tendrara, which is on the Algerian border. We'll talk about that more in a moment. That is actually a very large world-scale asset, but early stage. We have Sidi Mokhtar on the other side of Morocco, and that's actually much less risky, but slightly smaller as well. Some good diversification there in the portfolio. And then we have Meridia, which is essentially a land grab around Tendrara. If Tendrara works, the value on that will open up as well. And finally, we brought in Schlumberger as a strategic partner. So Schlumberger is paying 80% of the bills in Morocco on Tendrara, on this well we're drilling now, in exchange for only 27.5% of the equity. So we've lined ourselves up with a sort of, I think they're 110 billion, massive company with great cash balance, great strength and technical expertise. And so that Schlumberger partnership is a partnership we're looking to replicate across other assets. And as you can see from the material that's up there, gas, we believe, is the place to be now. Yes, the oil price is low, and we're disconnected from that. We have strong fundamentals around European gas. Yes, we see gas as a bridge fuel between dirty coal, oil, the whole carbon consciousness, global warming. We see gas as being the future, a bridge really over the next 10 or 15 years between dirty coal and oil to the non-fossil fuel solutions we as a world will need in due course. And that's where we see gas, and that's why we're in gas. And it's worth adding that we have production, as I said, that we are well funded with about $27 million of cash at the moment, which funds our drill program. And with the help from Schlumberger paying the bills, we're in a great place. And the one final thing in this rather long introduction is to say that it's a great time to be a successful, well-funded gas business in a sector that is a bloodbath. Most oil companies at this point have valuations that are very low. Most assets are for sale one way or the other. Cash is king, and there's very limited competition. And that's how we ended up positioning ourselves with Morocco, and that's why we are currently in the process of trying to firm up other transactions which will broaden our risk exposure across the region, staying with the Med, staying with gas probably, and certainly staying onshore. That's really our strategy, has been to make the most of what is quite a tough sector for most of the companies. So our portfolio, a little map here. You can see as we run down the east and southern coast of Italy, we have a broad portfolio there, 18 licenses. We tend to focus in on just 1 or 2 of the core assets, but actually there's a broad portfolio there and a funnel of assets that will see us through the next 5 years. And then in Morocco, where we're currently drilling Tendrara, which is on the Algerian border, but it's important that it's the other side of it. And Sidi Mokhtar on the other side of Morocco, which is a great asset and brings us a little bit of diversification. So the near-term action here, just to point you at the map, is Tendrara first, then Sidi Mokhtar, and then we're going to come back and drill Badile. Now, Badile, I will talk to you about in a moment, but has a certain scale to it. It's an exploration prospect, it's Po Valley, and it's got massive capability to change our world. Mid-case, about 180 BCF, so that's about $500 million of value. Upside case, a couple of billion. So massive if it works, but there's risk. And we've positioned ourselves with these three strategic plays, Badile, Tendrara, Sidi Mokhtar. And as you can see on the sort of bubble chart here, some of the numbers are quite large. If you add up our unrisked MPVs, now that's not great maths, you shouldn't really do it, but we've done it anyway just to illustrate the prize. You've got 2.2 billion euros of value here. And these are not upside values, these are mid-case values, all CPR numbers. So quite large if a couple of these strategic plays come in. The team, I'm ex-Shell and ex-Interpipeline, which is a Toronto-listed energy player. I'm a finance M&A guy by training and an accountant if you go back far enough. Been with the company for 4.5 years, and have sort of come in as part of a new team together with this gentleman, Luca Mededu, who's not here with us now. He's Mr. Managing Director Morocco, so quite busy, as you'd expect, on Tendrara drilling. And we've recently added some more people to the crew. Mary as CFO, who's halfway through across the room here. Leonardo Spicci, who's recently taken over in Italy as our Managing Director to ensure, particularly on the permitting, which is one of the bugbears and frustrations we all have with Italian oil and gas businesses, that gets navigated successfully. And then just recently, Leonardo Salvadori, we hired him directly from Cairo, where he was living for 8 years running Dana Gas. He's come in as Business Development Director to help us screen and execute some of these a world of opportunities for new projects. So it's a good team. It's a blend of financial, commercial, and technical skills, which is what you need in a business like ours. And so the first strategic play, and this is where we're drilling at the moment, is Tendrara. This is the border with Algeria. Algeria, as most of you know, is one of the largest gas producers in the world. The gas which is produced there is largely from the Taghi Reservoir, and it is largely exported through this red line, which is the GME export line into southern Europe. Our bet here is quite a simple one. Our bet is that the Taghi Reservoir extends beyond the border being in geological time a reasonably recent creation. And our bet is that this 120-kilometre distance to the GME pipeline is actually quite a small one. And quite easy to construct a pipeline. It's about 30-40 million euros at current prices, which are down in the current climate, as you might expect. And so there have been already 7 wells on Tendrara, 5 of which found hydrocarbons, 2 of which tested successfully gas in the Taghi Reservoir. And what we are doing with the well that spud last week is drilling, 40 days drilling, 80 days including fracking and testing, is drilling up the top of that structure, which has good 3D seismic and is really transformational for us and for the entire eastern Morocco play. A couple of things to note. Shell have taken the license to the north, the west and the south surrounding us. That's interesting and tells us a little bit about their intention, which I think is important. Shell have a view that the deeper exploration, I believe, particularly is large scale, and the numbers they're banding around are much larger than the numbers we started. The back-to-back wells we have commenced drilling now, this is a zoom in of the structure, will actually just deal with this part of Tendrara, so a very small part of the overall structure. There have been other discoveries dotted around, and Meridia is a zone that we have recently taken up. And Tendrara is good because Schlumberger are paying 80% of it. It's reasonably shallow, which is good. It is actually tried and tested, and this Taghi Reservoir, which is very well understood and has been producing for decades in Algeria, does extend over. The 3D tells us that, the existing wells tell us that. If we can make a play out of this, we really could have something that affects sort of Southern Europe gas supplies in terms of how material it might be. So that's the first strategic play. We should know the answer in June, July, so it's quite near-term action. And we're rather excited, having introduced Schlumberger into it in December. One of the beauties of Morocco is how quickly you can permit. Italy can be a bit slow, and many of you who have been involved with our stock will know that it can take a few years to churn through the permitting. Morocco is the exact opposite. It's sort of 4 months versus 4 years to permit an asset in those two geographies. So there's a nice inherent diversification in Morocco vis-a-vis the permitting in Italy. The second asset, which is equally interesting but on completely the other side and a different geological risk, is Sidi Mokhtar. Now Sidi Mokhtar has a long history with different operators, and what we've done here is buy up and then farm out this asset. So we bought up through 2 separate deals, 75% an operatorship of the asset, the remaining 25% being with the state company on him. And we have then farmed out to a company called Calibra Petroleum, which is a privately owned vehicle with good oil and gas experience. We have farmed it out in exchange for some cash and some significant carry. So the cash there's about $6 million. The carry is about 18 million gross. So it's now looking like a rather sweet spot we've got ourselves in. 25% working interest, some cash in the bank from the transaction, and a fully carried activity plan which takes us forward. And the history here is 2 wells on a structure called Muscala, which actually is rather critical to the journey because neither of them were tested. So they were wells, we believe they're gas bearing, but they're completely untested. And therefore there is an opportunity here for us to come in and with a relatively limited amount of capital, test the wells, and they're very close to infrastructure. Unlike the other side of Morocco, which we were just talking about, where you have to build pipelines, this is very close to existing production and demand. And therefore, with a limited amount of capital, we can really open up the play. So this is the other side of Morocco. You see the assets here, a bit further south in Casablanca. Marrakesh is just an hour and a half's drive just to position you there. Again, reasonably shallow, understood geology, and no drilling required to get to first gas, which we believe is important, and Calibra obviously believe that as well. The third strategic play, and now we're going to shoot over to northern Italy, is Badile. So close to Milan, good 3D seismic, and in a very tried and tested basin where you have assets such as Molossa, which have been producing for decades nearby, which are analogous in terms of the core geology here. And the plan, this is quite a deep well, it's quite expensive. We're looking at about 25 million euros on a 100% basis, completed and tested. And we're looking to drill this at the end of this year. So the sequence this year is more or less back-to-back drilling, 2 wells at Tendrara, Sidi Mokhtar, and then Badile. Now, the Badile permitting is an issue which has been, I joined the company really for this asset, Badile, 3.5 years ago, and we've made good progress. We had the EIA, which is the environmental assessment, approved last April. We are expecting in the next couple of weeks to finally finalise the Badile permitting. We have been saying that for a while, but Italy can be a little bit slow. The good news, there's not been any objections in all these various meetings they go through, but the paperwork, the signatures in Italy can take a bit of time, which is one of the reasons why we did Morocco, to hedge that off a little bit. But we will get there, and when we do, we'll be farming this out and coming down to perhaps half of our current position. We're currently 100%, and then drilling it at the end of this year. And this one has a certain scale to it, as I alluded to before. You can see from the numbers here, best case estimate, these are in euros, about $500 million. And in dollars, it's actually $2 billion on the upside case. So, if any one of these strategic plays come off, it's really transformational for this stock. And Badile's got the sort of production levels with it, which would actually produce here the 4th largest onshore asset in Europe. So really good scale if we can get it to work. There is risk, it's exploration, but we're very excited about it. And like other assets in Italy, close to infrastructure, about 100 meters in this case to the high pressure line. Great Italian pricing, about $6, $7. And actually after the farm out, we only expect to be spending about $6 million on this asset. So actually we're funded for all 3, subject to that Badile farm out. I mentioned the good quality 3D seismic already, and the permitting is really the near-term action. So those 3 strategic plays is what we focus on. That's about near-term action. We think the market in this climate, particularly in our sector, appreciates that, but there is a much deeper sort of funnel to the portfolio. In Italy, we have 3 licenses which are currently producing. They're all in the sort of range of 0.3 to 0.4 million scuffs a day at the moment. We're hoping Nervesa near term will shoot up there once we've reperforated. We have 6 other appraisal assets that we haven't talked to you about, which are all material. Italy, as you probably know, in the 70s and 80s was largely drilled up onshore by Eni and Agip. And our model has been to pick up those existing discoveries that were never commercialized at the time. They were looking for oil. The oil price was even lower than it is now back then. And, the gas was walked away from and seen as non-commercial. So we're going back, picking up these gas assets in a strong gas price environment and actually commercializing those. So very exciting, but those appraisal assets. And then we have a few other exploration licenses like Badile, which will be a chance to, in the long term, because those are probably 2 to 3 years away from permitting, to see those through. And so what we've done here is position the business with those 3 strategic plays. And here you see our cash balance. This one's in dollars, and how we're spending the money as we go forward. Bottom line, in 18 months, after we've delivered those 3 assets and rolled the dice on those key strategic plays, we're left with a $5 million cash balance. That's after everything, after costs are paid, etc. And we think that means that we can now claim that we're fully funded, which is great. However, it's slightly ignores the fact that we actually are on a trajectory to grow here outside of Italy and Morocco, as well as consolidation in country. And so we've been working for some time, taking advantage of the distress in the market, projects in sort of surrounding geographies, trying to focus on production, because that's something which I think we could do with a little bit more of in terms of portfolio balance. But it's a good time to be a buyer. If you've got cash, things are generally cheap and distressed and for sale, and there's not much competition at the moment. So that's in a way our story. It is a play very clearly on European gas fundamentals, which we believe in. We see as totally disconnected to oil. We see the Europe-Russia relationship as continuing to deteriorate over time, and as it does, we see that problems being reflected in upside on the gas price, as happened with Ukraine a couple of years ago. We're betting on those sort of fundamentals, and then obviously because we're funded, because we've got a near-term drill program, we're actually in great shape, and we can weather the storm that is our sector, and hopefully even take advantage of it. And so we just captured on the bottom here, and then I'll give a chance for people to sort of Q&A, the near-term news flow. Hopefully we've covered most of this. Badile permitting is not far away now. The first well has already spud, and we should know the results during the summer. The Sidi Mokhtar, with Calibra's help, we will be doing an extended well test on both of those wells, and that again will dovetail quite nicely, we believe, with the Tendrara work program. We're then straight into a second well on Tendrara. The combination of those first two wells is enough for the pipeline concession application, moving us towards first gas potentially next year. And then we'll farm in Badile. That may happen before some of these. Drill the well at the back end of the year. And obviously with Schlumberger's help, they've defined themselves as a strategic partner, and it's exclusive, as in they don't have any other strategic partners in Europe and Africa. So we're in that sweet spot where we can do other deals leveraging their financial strength. And that's Sound Energy today.